Welcome to our inclusion study group at the seniors at the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. And we are taking another look this week at a really remarkable article written by Tema Okun on white supremacist culture, which for many of us means the culture we grew up in, the air we breathe, the water we swim in, and it can be hard to see from that position. So she's isolated a number of points about, and I had sent this around to everybody last week. This week, I'm sorry to say, I have not been able to do things like that because the windstorm took out my internet and I completely got off track of everything. And it was kind of nice to not get the news and not hear what was going on quite so much. But I'm afraid that I left a few things drop. And so one of them was resending this article, but I had sent it last time. So if you joined us before, or it's on the invitation, you will find it there. And one of the things about this article is it outlines these, like I said, these major points about white supremacist culture. And they are so familiar that I have to say, I pretty much use at least one of these things every time I open my mouth. And sometimes I've used every one of them in a day. Defensiveness, the sense of urgency, the black and white thinking, either or, worshiping the written word, only one way to think. There's just so many of these pieces that that we get caught up in. And I think especially now when, of course, with everything that's going on in our world, there is both a sense of urgency and a complete sense of, for me anyway, lack of control. And I notice that one of the things that all of these points of white supremacist culture have in common is they give us the illusion, that precious illusion of control, which is all it ever is, right? And being willing to set that down and say, wow, what if we don't have control over this? What if this world is not in our control, and that's not even the point? That opens up a whole different way of experiencing the world for me, or looking at the way we relate to each other. I've shocked you all into immobility.
I feel like I'm out of control when it comes to that constantly. I feel like I am not in control at all.
Yeah, and that is for us, for like middle-class white people, that's an uncommon, we're used to swimming on the surface and feeling like our bubble is pretty big and we understand how everything works and it all works pretty much in our favor. And what if it doesn't? And so I think that I feel like in a way that feeling out of control and that feeling confused and lost, or just not trusting the system, that must be what life is like a lot for transgender people, people of color, for people, immigrants, people from other cultures. I think we're starting to experience the world in a way that might be much more familiar to people who are not in our bubble. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Does.
Bonnie, you're nodding. Do you feel like that's something?
Hi. Yes, I think that's a very observant way to capture trying to see what it's like from someone else's point of view, and that always being off kilter, the always wondering, is it something is it just my color, or just my this or that, or is it something I've said, or, having to go through so many layers before you get to the real part. It's really well, I'll give you one little example. We were downtown one day and we were standing in line at Coquette, and this very handsome, it was a mother and son, a Black mother and son, dressed really nicely. And they were there, and then we took and I looked, and I was looking at the kid because he had on these fancy buck shoes, and I was sort of admiring them. And then he saw me kind of looking, and he quickly looked away, and then we went down and sat down, and they happened to come by. So I said to him, gosh, I was admiring your shoes. They're so And I remember those shoes. I remember having shoes like that. Well, that just made him so happy and his mother so happy. And it wasn't like I was looking at him because there was something else, you know. So it's a very delicate place they're in always, and it's unsettling. Yeah.
So that feeling for, yeah, and defensiveness is one of the markers. And I'm realizing it's defensiveness not just for people who are swimming in white culture, but for people who aren't. Like, we're mutually
Yes.
defensive. And boy, are we seeing that in action right now, right? And so,
Yes.
yeah, if we are looking at somebody who is not like us, their assumption is usually going to be, we think there's something wrong.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Mhm. And it washed over me at that moment because it was like turning the light switch off and on. It was like turning the light switch on because, boy, they both just started smiling and talking and being, you know, just yeah, just the way they'd like to be, I'm sure. Just the way they would like to be all the time. I mean, for some people, their real self. Mhm.
Yeah, and you think about what it's like to be that kid who can't even be delighted in his shoes and feel safe about it until he knows he's not going to get attacked for it, right?
It's okay. Right. Right.
I'd
Oh,
like to
boy.
add to that incident. I just finished reading a book for our book group called Rising Out of Hatred by Eli Saslow. And it's the story of Derek Black, who was raised to be the heir apparent in the Stormfront movement. They are white nationalist movement. There's tricky language between a white nationalist and a white supremacist. So the website is definitely attracted white supremacists and Nazis and all kinds of dreadful things. But anyway, he is a white nationalist for sure and was raised to be one until he went to college, and he had exactly what happened to you with the shoes, with the kids' shoes. People befriended him and they respected him. They built a trustful relationship of mutual enjoyment, not the white buck shoes, you know, but of concepts of, you know, how when you're in college, you want to explore everything. Well, they were exploring everything in every which way together. And that built a relationship so that he began to realize when he looked around him, holy moly, I'm friends with a Jew. Well, Jews aren't white people. How can this be? You know, I'm friends with an immigrant from Argentina, you know, and I like him, and we share, you know, we're pals. So this gradual realization comes to him, and if you want me to, I'll tell you how the book ends. But if you don't, you can read the book. It's a very, very powerful book about, and he's an attractive, you know, he's the kind of kid you kind of wish you had as your own kid. He's like, he's caring, he's very bright. He doesn't just, you know, go out kayaking. You know, he goes kayaking in search of the smallest dragonfly he can find. I don't know. I'm making all that up. But you get the picture. You know, he's just a very, very charming and broad thinking. So I think for him, even though he was indoctrinated, I mean, his parents took him out of school at grade 4 and homeschooled him because the school was getting to be too brown. Okay. They live in Florida. And so I'm sorry, I don't know your first name, the lady that was just talking about the shoes, but
Bonnie.
Bonnie?
Mhm.
Oh, hi, Bonnie. That was wonderful because that's what this book is about, you know. And that's what it took to make, well, I've just blown it. Okay, so he's no longer a white supremacist, you know.
Well, it makes me curious. I don't know if the book went into it, but how did his parents respond with this change?
Well, he's a huge disappointment to his parents. They have continued on. He was, as I said, to be the heir apparent, but also they have this website. He was to take over the website. His mother, interestingly enough, seems to be the most diligently resentful of him. The father is still does want to make some contact and has made some contact, but
Yeah,
they just can't see eye to eye,
right.
you know. But he has, but the majority of
probably-
the family
yeah.
is calling him a traitor. I mean, he's suffering in that regard.
Yes,
Mm.
sure.
I'm curious, Nancy, did this happen to be the story of David Duke's grandson?
No, well, David Duke is his godfather.
Oh, okay.
They are not physically related, but yes, this is David Duke's godson. Yes.
Okay, because I think I remember reading a magazine article that he wrote about this experience of having his college roommate be Jewish, and horrified, and then discovering where the guy was like, well, sit down and talk to us. Like, let's find out, what do you think?
Come and have Seder with us.
Yeah.
Because I make a great salmon, dinner. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So it was the normalization of human to human was able to make the transition is the point
Right.
of, or what my takeaway from the book anyway.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
But also it seems like it was like what Bonnie did, the reaching out as a human
Yes,
to human and
exactly.
saying, hey, you look like a human being to me. Nice shoes. That allowed
Yeah.
that connection.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Karen, you got something?
Oh, I just said it. It's all about making connections, getting out of our comfort zone and making connections
All right.
with people outside of our community. And, it always comes back to that song from the South Pacific that you have to
Got to be taught.
carefully teach people to hate. You don't come out of the womb
Yeah.
hating. We're taught to hate. And
Right.
Yep.
that's, I always come back to that because, this has been a forever problem. And instead of trying to, use all of our effort to make divisions, it's like using our efforts to make connections.
Right. And I think back to Anne's point about the offensiveness, the white nationalists and the white supremacists are very defensive because they believe that in 2045, I believe it is, that the white people will not be the majority in the United States. And statistically, that's pretty much going to happen. And whereas a lot of people are just kind of rolling along with that and saying, yeah, well, that's the trend. These people are feeling that's unacceptable because they're entitled as white people to be the majority. And so they're very fearful. And when you
That's
bring
the
fear
thing.
into the whole equation, then
Yeah.
Yeah.
that just heightens a lot of other emotions, including defensiveness. So they're very defensive.
I don't know if any of you know who Debbie Hazy is, but she's lived on the island for a long time, and she is one of the people who's learned to use that. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting the phrase, but it's like compassionate listening is one of the titles for it.
Mhm, mhm.
I think it's nonviolent communication, which never quite clicked for me, but compassionate listening is a little bit easier. But she went to, she's been to Palestine, she's gone to Israel, she's gone into the Deep South and a lot of other places, but she happened to be marching in Bremerton sometime this spring and saw a young man with some hate signs and who was yelling and throwing things and hassling people. So she dropped out of the parade and went over and started talking to him. And it was kind of hilarious. She said, tell me, I'm just so curious and interested, what is going on with you? And what do you feel like when you see us doing this? And he said, oh, nothing much really. I just kind of wanted to hassle people. I was just seeing if I could make some trouble. I didn't really care, but
Yeah.
you libtards need to get shaken up now and again, right? But they ended up having a really pretty interesting conversation, and she realized that what he was saying is he doesn't have an agenda except to be anti.
Mhm.
And that is so interesting to me. Like, would you rather, we're if the passion is all negative, it doesn't take us very far, does it?
Yes.
But how we reach that person, I thought it was really cool that she would just walk up to this kid
Mhm.
and just start talking to him. And because she's friendly,
Really.
maybe she liked his shoes. I don't know, probably, right?
Yeah.
And she did, right? It's a good line, Bonnie. I think I'll have to use that.
Yeah.
But I just think Karen's
Well,
point
it
of,
works.
yeah, making connection changes the conversation,
Yes.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing to me was too, because I think our awareness is so much more right now, but I saw the kid come alive, but I could see the mom, and the mom just started to smile, and the mom was being very reserved, but then that just gave her permission too. She just started to smile, and it doesn't take, well, I don't know. It seems very possible that we could get through some of this bad stuff. The reaching out, it's very hard for people to reach out. I found that. They don't want to be the one to reach out. So if you can be the one to reach out, it's a big help. Mhm.
Well, if that's something we all take away from this, that's a pretty great thing. Like, it's true to be brave enough. And I grew up in New England, and you didn't just walk up to people, and you didn't just
Right.
say something to them. And if somebody said something horrible, you just didn't acknowledge it. But I think the thing now, we're being told to sort of acknowledge and confront. But I also think, what if we don't just confront? What if we also connect?
Yeah.
What if,
Yeah.
Mhm.
instead of saying, wow,
Yeah.
that's such a hateful thing to say, whoa, I'm curious about that. Can you say a little more? That's a magic phrase for a lot of people. Can you say a little more?
Right.
And
That's
then
good.
listen.
Mhm. And listen.
It seems to
And
be.
listen. Mhm. Because it's very easy to be judgmental for all of us, I mean, I think being judgmental isn't even anything about all of the bad issues right now. It's just sort of something. And I think sometimes that just comes from a little insecurity or whatever, it's a safety device too, whatever, being a little judgmental. But
Well, that is certainly a part of our culture, isn't it, too? And it's very human. I think the human brain is all about categorizing. Yes, no, you, me, us, them. It's just how we think, and it's really hard not to do that. But I think seeing ourselves do it can help us break through it a little bit. When you're walking down the street and you see a big black man approach you, to say, am I really unsafe? Or am I telling myself a story about this person?
right.
And maybe if you say, cool shoes, man,
Yeah.
you might have a really different conversation.
Well, remember when that lady was
Sorry,
I have a question. How many people on Bainbridge Island are big and black that you see walking down the street every day?
Oh,
I live in Buffalo, okay? I mean, if we really, if I don't even go over to Seattle anymore. And as I've told many of you before, the last 10 years of my life, in my working life, I worked for a fantastic black guy who owns a big company over in Seattle. And I had lots and lots and lots of contact. But right now, if you walk down the street, you're just looking for some black guy to walk up to and say, well, gee, I like your shoes. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think that I would say that, and I think that's being very friendly. But we really live in a bubble here on Bainbridge Island, and a bubble like most that we've ever seen. I mean, you can go to the Hamptons, you can go to Lake Forest, Illinois, you can go to places where if you see a black person, they're carrying a shovel. And I don't say that in any derogatory sense, but it's very difficult. You want to reach out, but how do you reach out to one person? or to one family, which you did, Bonnie, and I think that's fantastic, and that's the right way to do it. It's just that we don't have the opportunity that we really
Yeah.
had if we were to go somewhere where we really could test that.
Mhm.
Well, you know what's interesting, Jim, is that on weekends, Bainbridge becomes much more colorful.
Yes,
Yeah,
it does.
Because
Question,
you walk
and-
around.
And I think that it's at that point, and this is what you were talking about too, Bonnie, is that this is where you become welcoming and receptive, and I mean, if you, and I believe that's really nice. But we do live in a bubble, and it's unlike any place I've ever been in my entire life.
And it's with the masks too, it's very difficult to I mean, I think your eyes say a little, but I try to smile, you know, but I mean, the person can't exactly see you smiling. So, yeah, it's.
Well, I think we're in a very difficult time. We all know that we're in a very difficult time here in this world today. I mean, you don't know how to act, really. You're afraid to act compassionately because you don't want to get too close to anybody, and you know, the interaction that we have today is very different than it was pre-COVID. So it makes it doubly difficult to be kind and loving.
Well, in response to that, Jim, now to all the people that are on this call today, one day, Tim and I were in that same location, and we saw Jim and Catherine, and we, you know, spoke to each other. And Jim, then you came over, and you were so friendly and so kind, it just about made me cry. Because we hadn't really met, but we knew each other. And it was really, it touched my heart. So, you know, that's like to like or whatever. But I mean, we're also very new. And it just struck our hearts how kind you were. So,
I
you know, we
appreciate
can
that.
all do.
I appreciate that. You know, this COVID has done a lot from that perspective. I mean, it's amazing. We recognize ourselves almost as well as we do every day on this call, because you know, the masks are covering everything up and so forth. But the fact is that this is a community that really is important to all of us, and especially in these times. So, you know, I was delighted to actually see you.
Yeah.
Hey, Don, I didn't see you before. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining. You got anything to throw in here?
Sure, I'll step in here this morning.
Yes.
And for Jim. I moved back to Bainbridge Island after that absence of 20 or so years, 2 years ago, and sought out the Evergreen Center. Which was interesting. Everybody was friendly, and I knew one of them very well from the past. So, but it was hard for me to develop a sense of belonging. And part of it's my own doing, because I got so accustomed as a gay man to concealing who I was that it was very difficult. It was difficult for me to talk about it. So it's always been my barrier to connecting with people like yourself. But Jim came forward and initiated a conversation. I was very appreciative of that. So maybe what I'm saying is that I don't know what you have talked about, participated in one of your death cafes, and that came there just by chance as well. So I appreciate that opportunity.
As we are seeing, I wouldn't have ever said that you could make a genuine personal connection on some medium platform like this, but I feel like you, Bonnie. I feel like we have. Like if I see you in the grocery store, I'm going to definitely come over and say, "Hey, nice shoes," right?
Okay. Okay.
But it's true. A
Lucky.
place where you feel, I mean, we are saying people are speaking truthful, thoughtful pieces of their heart here. And it, because of that, we are making friendships that
Yes.
we might not have if we had just passed each other in the hall from between a card game and the, I don't know, pizza.
Right.
I mean, you know, it, I think
Sure.
making space for communication that goes past the surface, I think that's one of the things
Right.
that we need to all really be paying attention to. And it can be online, it can be in person, it can be at the grocery store. But I think we're also very hungry for it. And this pandemic,
Yeah.
social distancing has certainly made us more aware of how much we do hunger for having truthful conversations, meaningful conversations.
Absolutely. There was a haiku I heard this week. Speaking of the virus, it was called, "We isolate now, so when we gather again, no one is missing."
Oh, nice.
That's nice.
So,
That's good.
so you know, that I have been reading this over and over again. So I remember that, you know, to be patient, to,
Mhm.
you know, be at the end of this, and then we can all get together and do big hugs, big
Yes.
physical
It's one
hugs.
of the things I miss most. Yeah.
Yeah, the two people that live in my house get a lot of hugs.
Yes.
so because that's what I need, because I can't get together with my friends and do it also. So those poor people, they're so sore from me hugging them.
Well, it's interesting you call out patience, because one of the things Tema Okun says about our white culture is that sense of urgency. Everything's really important. It has to happen right away. And we don't have a lot of patience. And I think it takes patience and listening to really develop the kind of more intimate connections and relationships that we are hungering for. And yet, when we're in popular culture, there isn't space or time for that.
I remember one time when I was working in Chicago and living in Chicago, I decided that I'd walk down the LaSalle Street, and everybody I saw, I would say good morning to, and how are you this morning, and so forth. Then walk about a block and turn around and look back, and you can see all these people thinking that you're, you know, this man is crazy. And I mean, completely crazy. I mean, what's the matter with him? And I feel the same way on Bainbridge or anywhere really now that COVID is here, because people they're afraid to look at you. I mean, they've got their masks on and they're hiding behind their masks, and so I always with the mask on say good morning to people, and they all look like they're in Chicago. It's crazy. This thing is having a horrible negative effect on us, and I think that our participation in this this particular forum is not only becoming more familiar, but it's becoming really, really nice. Because when we actually do see one another on the street, it's almost like you want to tear your mask off and go over and hug, but you can't do that. So. This is a great forum as far as I'm concerned, very educational as well.
I don't know if any of you remember, there used to be a gentleman on the ferry, and he was, as you left, he was an older black guy, and he, as everybody got off the ferry, he made a point of saying, "You have a good day." And he'd look at you, and he'd point at you, and he'd say, "You have a good day. You have a good day. Hey, have a sweet day." Hey, and it was amazing. And it really made a connection. And when he became partly, he couldn't have a job that required him to stand all day. And so he applied for a different job on the Washington State Ferries, which has a pretty solid racist history, refused to give him a job. So he had to step down and retire. And so Jerry Elfendahl, who was at that time involved with the Total Experience Black Gospel Choir, he arranged to have the gospel choir come on the ferry, and this guy's one of his last runs. And he came with his wife, and Jerry had been working the ferries for a couple days, and he had collected bags full of cards and money and gifts because Washington State Ferries had fired this guy right before he was ready to collect his pension, so he didn't qualify, of course, right? And so he walks on, and there's this big standing ovation. It was one of those ridiculous things. And then he came back, and the gospel choir was singing. And then Jerry had found people to talk, like this kid on his skateboard saying, dude, you were the only guy who ever looked at me in the whole day. And this businessman in his three-piece suit saying the same thing. You know, all day I go to work and I work with people and no one ever looks me in the eye. I'm really going to miss that contact with you. Over and over and over, people got up and witnessed that just simply meeting their eye and saying, I see you, made a huge impact.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, this is part of our white culture that is very
Yes.
isolating. And it's something, I mean, you don't have to point and say, hey, you have a good day. But I think just the simple acknowledgement that we see each
Yeah.
other is really more
Connecting.
important than ever.
I remember him, Ann, very, very well. As a matter of fact, he was on the 710, and for many, many years, and we really became friends. I think all of us, because he was so welcoming and outgoing, and really a nice guy.
I was an English teacher, and I don't know, some class I took along the way, they talked about the same point in a way of connecting. You know, it's hard. You've got 35 or 40 kids in the room, and you're trying to connect. But they suggested standing outside the door and looking at each kid as they came in and say something personal. And that really was powerful. That was powerful because it opened those kids up. As they came in, they felt noticed
Seen.
and, you know,
Seen.
was important.
That's funny. That's part of the Waldorf school tradition. But each child has to look the teacher in the eye too, and they shake hands and say good morning to you and make eye contact. And the teachers said it was just as important for the kids to look at them as it was for them to be looking at the kid, because they were teaching these kids to make that kind of connection with everybody. And I think we've lost that to a large extent.
Right.
Go ahead. Ann.
I'm just going to say another place that is an important one to make a contact and connection is with all the checkers at the stores. The clerk,
Absolutely.
because I asked somebody at Safeway, and I said, I'm sure you get people are thanking you all day long. And they looked at me and said, not really. And I was like, what? Really? Like, here you are on the front line taking, you're standing here in the line of danger so that we can get our food. And they're saying, thank you. We don't hear that very much. We hear, you guys are always out of grape juice or whatever it is. And I think, whoa, there's a place we can all say, I see you.
That's
Thank
terrible.
you for being here. And I don't care if you don't have any grape juice. I'm good with
Right.
bingo.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, just making those human connections and making sure that nobody's invisible, because that's what underclass is
Yeah.
invisible people.
Yeah.
And I think if we come out of this pandemic situation understanding that frontline people are not underclass or shouldn't be, that can help change the world too.
They are essential. They are essential. Right now, Misty, who works at Town & Country, is more important to me than a hedge fund manager.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
And Shelley. And all of them. I know their names. I'm not going to name them all because you all know them too, because they're such wonderful. Denise at the coffee stand. People are my friends. We've become friends, and that's what community is all about. Is making friends with the people that we see.
I think part of what it really is, Karen, is respect. Being respectful goes such a long way. And I think that's one of the things that many people of color do not get from white people very often. And that's maybe one of the pieces, like respectful kindness is a huge gift we can give to the world right now, to everybody we meet. And if you feel like you're not seeing enough colorful people on the sidewalk, you need to come out on a Saturday or a Sunday or a holiday, and you will see a whole lot more. And to me, that's kind of great. It's like welcoming people to come to a place that they might have heard isn't so friendly. And maybe we can make it more so.